All right, today we're diving into one of the most epic stories on our planet. I'm talking about the journey of plants, right? How they went from these tiny, simple little things floating in the water to the enormous green kingdom that, makes life on Earth possible. And we're going to start at the very, very beginning. I mean, it's a huge question, isn't it? Just look outside. You've got everything from a tiny patch of moss to a giant redwood tree. So how in the world do you even begin to make sense of all that? How do you organize a kingdom with literally hundreds of thousands of different species? Well, that's exactly the puzzle we're going to start piecing together. Okay, so before we can jump in and meet the plants, we kind of need to understand the rule book, right? The system scientists use to group everything together. And I know, classification can sound a little dry, but trust me, the story of how we figured this out is actually pretty fascinating because the rules have kept changing as we learn more. So way back in the day with folks like Linnaeus, it was all about what you could see on the surface. Leaf shape, number of petals. It was what we call an artificial system. And it worked, kind of, but it's a bit like organizing your bookshelf based on the color of the book covers instead of what's inside. Then, in the 19th century, we started digging a little deeper, looking at internal structures with more natural systems. But the real game changer? That came with modern genetics, which gave us these phylogenetic systems, and that changed, well, everything. And here's the key idea that we use today. We're not just grouping plants by what they look like anymore, we're grouping them by family. The whole goal is to build a massive family tree for all of plant life, to figure out who's related to who shares a great-great-great-great-grandparent. This evolutionary story, this family tree, that's going to be our map for this whole explain. So where does our journey on this map begin? Well, it starts where pretty much all life started, in the water. So let's meet our first group, the incredibly diverse and honestly super important world of algae. So what exactly is an alga? Well, a few things make an alga an alga. They've got chlorophyll, so they make their own food from sunlight. Almost all of them live in water. And, this is the big one, they have a really simple body. The technical term is thallus, which is just a fancy way of saying they don't have any of the complex parts you'd expect on a plant, like true roots or stems or leaves. But don't let simple fool you into thinking they're all the same. The variety is just mind-blowing. Let's start on the small end. You've got these incredible microscopic colonies like volvox, which are basically these tiny, perfect little spheres made up of hundreds of individual cells all working together. Then you can move up a step in complexity to filamentous forms like Ulothrix. Here, the cells join up end to end, creating these long, stringy, thread-like structures. And then you go to the complete other end of the spectrum. You get these massive marine kelps. We're talking giants that can grow hundreds of feet long, forming these vast underwater forests that are just bursting with life. So yeah, from a microscopic speck to a sprawling forest. That's the incredible range we're talking about with algae. Now, to try and get a handle on all this diversity, scientists usually break algae down into three main classes. And it's pretty straightforward. It's mostly based on their color. You've got your green algae, your brown algae, and your red algae. And as you can see here, it's the different pigments inside them that give them their distinct colors. And they even store their food energy a little differently too. Okay, so they come in all shapes and sizes. Cool, but why should you care about algae? Well, it turns out these simple little organisms are, and I'm not exaggerating here, some of the most important life forms on the entire planet. They are the definition of unsung heroes. Okay, check this out. At least half, 50%, of all the carbon dioxide fixation on Earth is done by algae. Let that sink in. That means that for every 2 breaths you take, one of them, you can thank algae for that oxygen. They are quite literally the lungs for all the water on our planet and the absolute bedrock of aquatic life. And their importance goes way beyond just making oxygen. I mean, first off, they're the base of pretty much every aquatic food web. But we humans use them for all sorts of stuff. Many types, like Porphyra or Laminaria, are a food source in cultures all over the world. We pull substances out of them, hydrocolloids, that are used as thickeners in things like ice cream and even toothpaste. Agar, that jelly-like stuff used in science labs, that comes from red algae. And maybe the coolest one of all, certain algae are so packed with protein that they're used as a food supplement for astronauts. Yeah, space food. So algae totally owned the water. But for millions and millions of years, the land was basically a barren rock, empty. That is, until our next group showed up. This brings us to the next big chapter in our story, the Bryophytes. These are the true pioneers, the first plants to make that incredibly brave leap out of the water and onto dry, or at least damp, land. You know, scientists have this perfect nickname for them. They call them the amphibians of the plant kingdom. And it makes so much sense, right? Think about a frog. It lives on land, but it absolutely has to go back to the water to reproduce. Well, that's a bryophyte. It's got 1 foot on the shore, but evolutionarily, it's still got 1 foot stuck back in the water. So what exactly changed with this big leap? Well, algae are totally aquatic, but bryophytes managed to live on land as long as it was a damp, shaded spot. Their bodies got a little more complex, though they still didn't have real roots or stems. But here's the catch. Here's the big thing they still have in common with their ancestors. Just like algae, they absolutely 100% depend on water to reproduce. And their life cycle really shows you why they're so tied to water. It's basically a 2-stage process. The main plant you actually see, the green, leafy part, is called the gametophyte. It produces the gametes, the reproductive cells. Now here's the critical part. The male gametes have to literally swim through a film of water to reach and fertilize an egg. So if there's no water, there's no swimming. No swimming, no fertilization. It's that simple. Once that happens, a new structure called the sporophyte grows out of it, and that's what releases spores to start the whole thing all over again. Now, you're not going to find mosses in a ton of products you buy at the store, but their role in the environment is just huge. They are the ultimate pioneers. Mosses are often the very first things that can grow on bare, solid rock. They slowly break that rock down, creating the first hints of soil that let other, bigger plants get a foothold. Their dense little mats are also amazing at preventing soil erosion, and one famous type, sphagnum moss, is what creates peat, which people have used for fuel for ages, and it's still used in gardening because it's like a super sponge for holding water. So let's wrap this part up. The bryophytes, our little plant amphibians, were incredibly brave. They took that first huge step and proved that plant life on land was possible, but they were still chained to the water. That reliance on water for reproduction kept them stuck in the damp, shady corners of the world. So that leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? What was the next breakthrough? What was the incredible innovation that finally let plants cut the cord, leave the water's edge behind, and truly conquer the land?